Today on FOTD, a somewhat special edition of the program. I'd like to draw attention toward and provide some brief education of a certain film which is lost to time. Many, a majority of, silent films are now lost. The need or impulse to archive as much as possible was apparently lost on the film distributors and studios of that era. Obviously though, for our debut entry of this format, we are not discussing a film from the silent era. Rather, I am shining a light upon the 1953 BBC six-part serial, parts 3 to 6 lost, The Quatermass Experiment, written by Nigel Kneale and directed by Rudolph Cartier. The Quatermass Experiment was broadcast live over a 6-week period from the 18th of July to the 22nd of August 1953. It chronicled the efforts of Professor Bernard Quatermass, the head of the British Experimental Rocket Group, to ensure the safe landing of the first manned flight into space. Upon doing so successfully, the drama truly begins as 2 of the 3 astronauts are missing, and the survivor, Victor Caroon, is behaving erratically. Now, the reason why a majority of this serial is lost is not due to the infamous junking policy which slaughtered so much 60s Doctor Who, but rather due to the fact that this serial was a live broadcast, not previously recorded. The process of actually recording one's live television broadcast was considered too inconvenient to repeat for parts 3 to 6, with only the initial 2 entries of the serial surviving to the modern day as a result. Even the actual quality of the recordings is subpar, frankly. The BBC attempted to telerecord the live broadcast. If you don't know what that is, well, they just placed a 35mm film camera lens in front of a video monitor screen, which was displaying the broadcast. Prior to videotape, this was the only method of preserving live television broadcasts, and a flawed one at that. Reginald Tate stars as Professor Quatermass and was the first actor to portray the iconic scientist. A strong precedent for the Doctor Who protagonist, Quatermass appeared in 2 other BBC serials in that decade. Due to Reginald Tate's passing in 1955, actor John Robinson replaced him for the titular role in that year's Quatermass 2. A third serial, 1958's Quatermass and the Pit, featured Andre Morel in the lead role. The final Nigel Kneale written Quatermass serial actually aired in 1979, on Thames Television rather, starring good old John Mills as the beloved Professor. We'd be careless in not mentioning Hammer Studios' productions of the 3 BBC Quatermass serials. 1955's The Quatermass Experiment starred an American actor, Brian Donlevy, as Quatermass. He returned for 1957's Quatermass 2 film adaptation, and then 10 years on in 1967, a very well-remembered Hammer film realization of Quatermass and the Pit starred Andrew Kerr as probably the most widely seen portrayal of Professor Quatermass these days. But anyway, that's the legacy of this serial and its titular protagonist, although I'd like to further discuss the content of that initial serial itself, well, where I can. Right from the onset, the utilization of Holst's Mars, Bringer of War, is enough indication that we are watching a program its creators took very, very seriously. This is great stuff, trust us, they tease. Whilst Kneale's actual screenplay is precise, methodical, considered, and scientifically substantial, I tend to think of Reginald Tate as the true anchor of the production. The seriousness of which he takes the performance of Quatermass ensures a believable realism, key to the heroic, comforting appeal of Quatermass. It is assuring to know that Quatermass, with nothing but his brain and his dedication to science, is able to figure out the mystery and save the day. He is almost like a successor to Sherlock Holmes in this respect, and distinct from the technobabble freedom which Doctor Who's writers may have felt, Kneale felt compelled to ground his narratives in a certain non-fantastical scientific technical realism. It is almost as though he considers how the scientific papers and journals might cover, would describe, the events of his screenplay and chooses to employ this language in order to realize it, ensuring its believability, its grounding, gravity, and accessibility and digestibility to all potential television audiences. The adult demographic were considered in particular, unique for television science fiction productions from the BBC at this time, as the genre had been considered traditionally juvenile. The Quatermass Experiment seemingly sought to appeal to those who had also been watching the educational programs being broadcast by the state, providing a consistency with that old Lord Reef memo of inform, educate, and entertain. Now, due to its status as essentially live theatre, the cast in general, led, empowered by Reginald Tate, ensures the effective believability of its scientific scenario, particularly where the laboratory set is concerned. Sometimes the small folk of the common classes are portrayed as cartoonish caricatures for humour's sake, like sitcom players popping into this science drama fiction serial, Although this could be seen as an attempt at grounding its speculative fantasies into a recognized, if not marinated, television reality. It is the successful delivery of dialogue which keeps the Quatermass experiment from transforming into something alien itself. Let's face it, the classic Doctor Who serials are intended for children. As much as I like them, frankly that's why I like them, especially in contrast to that newer garbage, it is hard to imagine the serious, stiff, grown-up viewers of dramas and documentaries broadcast by the BBC taking to Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor wrestling the charred master down some stairs next to the obelisk containing Rassilon's Eye of Harmony within the panopticon of the Time Lord Citadel as Gallifrey is threatened to be forever consumed by the nucleus of a black hole. Or, Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Again, I love that era of Who, but it is what it is, right? Instead, the seriousness of which the British thespian tradition was taken even in television productions, and science fiction ones at that, guarantees the effectual staging of Nigel Kneale's superlative scripts. I'd be remiss to exclude praise for the serial's actual director, Rudolph Cartier. From what I have read of Cartier, considered one of the very finest television directors to ever work at the BBC, he sought to maximise the quality of every production he was attached to. He never wrote any of the screenplays he was hired to stage, although knowing his name would be attached to the production, he was determined to conjure as much magic as his assigned scripts and casts were capable of. It seems that what Cartier pioneered was feeling insecure as to how these television broadcasts would actually turn out, motivating in him a great degree of quality control. In fact, if the behaviour of the cast can be truly credited to one individual observer, it is most likely Cartier. Kneale certainly felt something akin to this, as Cartier would return to direct the BBC productions of both Quatermass 2 and Quatermass and the Pit. Judging the quality of this entire serial is not possible, though assessing the merits of the first two episodes is. Their professionalism oozes out of the screen in question. They were the greatest, most admirable pieces of television production yet realised. They set a gold standard. The entire initial Quatermass trilogy of serials did, for the potential accomplishments of genre fiction on British television. Its impact of its home nation's television culture simply goes without saying, although its prospective influence on the rest of the English-speaking world is rather unclear. I cannot say for certain whether the Quatermass experiment served as a creative predecessor and influence upon the original Star Trek program, although if it did, it only retained a vague respect for scientific plausibility. The fact that the majority of this legendary serial's broadcast was not recorded is an absolute shame, although we ought to be at least grateful that we can still receive a taste of what it was. I shall link in the description 2 YouTube uploads of the first 2 episodes of the Quatermass experiment, so you may enjoy it for yourselves. There was never any reason why science fiction had to display contempt for science itself, and if there was, it certainly wasn't to ensure the composition of good fiction, as Nigel Kneale has demonstrated with his Quatermass character. One of the finest creations of the 20th century, Professor Bernard Quatermass is one of the few fictional characters who makes manifest an ideal, ethical scaffold for human nobility. A contemporary scientific existential anxiety reaches its catastrophic extreme, emboldening and awakening end-all relentless human fears, and it is up to Quatermass and his respect for the scientific method to resolve the crisis, and prove once more the worth, if any, for his species and its intellectual traditions. Thank you all and have a tremendous day.